People who have had parents walk in on you during intimacy. What happened? One of my first boyfriends and I were having intimacy in his bed in his parents' house. We were being super quiet, had Family Guy playing in the background and the lights were off. We were both laying on our sides under the covers and hit it from behind. We were both facing the door. His mom came in while we were doing it and the three of us had a full conversation about dinner. Part of me thinks she was just oblivious, but another part of me wonders if she knew and was just messing with us. Story 2. An ex invited me over while the parents were out. We were teenagers. Her younger siblings were home and just watching TV, so we went to her room to fool around. Her younger brother walked in on us, then told her parents. Her dad was surprisingly cool about it. Asked if we could talk about what happened. I said of course. He understood he couldn't stop us from doing it. He just wanted to make sure we were being safe and I was being respectful. And maybe next time we should lock the door. It was more of a talk I ever got from my parents, which was literally just, don't be freaking stupid, please. Story 3. My girlfriend and I were having some sexy time at her house. We were in the middle of it when her mom knocked on the door. Still had a shirt on, but my girlfriend was not under the sheets. I sat up straight with only my covered upper body showing. Her mom came in with our newborn niece, who was a couple of months old. She handed her to me because she had to do something really quickly. My girlfriend and I burst out laughing. A couple of minutes later, my mother-in-law came back, had a small talk, took the baby out of my hands, and left. I honestly think she did not suspect a thing. Story 4. My girl invited me over for dinner to meet her dad. We were hanging out in her room later on. Her dad said he was going to run an errand and would be leaving soon. The girl started begging me for intimacy. I told her, "Your dad is going to walk in. Let's at least wait for him to leave first." She said she wanted it now and begged so much that I gave in and gave it to her. Lo and behold, her father walked in and saw us. I don't know why she couldn't wait. I didn't even want to have intimacy. I just wanted to nap before my night shift. Story 5. I met this girl and stayed over after our second date. She lived with her parents, but failed to mention that her dad drops their pug off in her bed around 4 a.m. every morning before he goes to work. I also sometimes wake up in heat in the middle of the night, so her dad opens the door while she's on top. She puts her head on the side of my neck, so I'm just staring at her dad. I don't know what possessed me to do this, but while making eye contact, I bit her ear. Her dad said, "Oh, I see what's going on here." We dated for 9 years and her dad never brought it up. It was actually really cool. The girl ended up cheating on me with someone older than her dad and got pregnant. I felt sorry for her dad. Her mom also cheated on him, and he gave me a pep talk one day, telling me to leave his daughter so my life wouldn't turn out like his. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. I left after that. Story 6. We weren't exactly walked in on, but it was close enough. For reasons not worth explaining, I was living with my girlfriend at her parents' house one summer, staying in a spare room in their basement as we were still quite young. I was watching TV in the basement one weekend afternoon and doing some laundry. My girlfriend came downstairs, and after a couple of minutes of chit-chat, she said, "Want to go have intimacy?" We went to my room and climbed onto the bed on all fours, making it very clear what she wanted. I started getting into it, and whatever I was doing was hitting all the right spots. She was loud, like really loud. This went on for a bit, and when we were done, we got dressed, opened the door, and found all my laundry that had been in the dryer, neatly folded and left in a pile on the floor outside my door. Message sent, message received. Story 7. When I was a teenager, I was at my then-girlfriend's, now wife's, father's house. He went to bed early for some reason and left us unsupervised downstairs. So we did what teens do and got to it. About 15 minutes in, he came downstairs. I jumped off and he doubled back upstairs. I left immediately. I kind of avoided her attempts to get me to go to her house for a bit. I don't want to pass away. And one day at work at a fast food joint, her dad came up to me while I was working and basically said it was on him. He should have known better than to barge in, and he got it. He said there was no anger and that I was still welcome at his house. This was in 2008, so it all worked out in the long run. Story 8. It completely ruined our relationship. I was adopted at 10, and my new parents were ultra-religious. My dad caught me with a girl, and I was grounded for months, which caused me to miss a prom. My girlfriend's mom freaked out on my parents for being petty morons and costing her daughter the prom. After that, they never trusted me again, and everything I said was apparently a lie. I had physical confrontations with them and started sneaking out to see my girlfriend. I acted up at school because of my terrible home life. I went to jail a few times, got out, and moved to another country. Now they have to take a flight to see their grandchildren. It's been nearly 20 years, and I still don't think we've all healed. Story 9. It was our first time on the couch in a new addition to the house, basically a movie and gathering room at the end of a hall. There was a glass door and I saw the hallway light flip on, so I threw her off me and held onto the blanket to keep us covered. My mom came walking down with 4 of her friends, all wanting to see the new room at 8 in the evening. Then they all proceeded to sit on the other end of the couch and interrogate us about what we were watching and yap about the new room. It was excruciating. Story 10. My girlfriend and I were home alone at her house, going at it in their basement laundry room. It was the room farthest from the front door, which bought us time if anyone came home, and there was a window facing the driveway so we'd hear a car door close. We didn't. We were both seconds from finishing, and her dad opened the laundry room door, saw us, and he and I made eye contact. "You're not doing laundry," he said, and walked out. "Why'd he come all the way down here?" she asked. She got dressed and went upstairs. I heard her yell, "Oh my God!" and I panicked. Imagined her dad with bolt cutters or a sawzall as he owned a construction company. I just started at the door, expecting him to come back in. I waited for what felt like an hour. There was a knock on the window. I saw her face. She was smiling from ear to ear. "Get out here, I want to go for a drive." I was confused and slowly walked upstairs and outside, still expecting a painful one. She was in the driveway. Her dad was in the driveway, and so was her mom, brother, and grandmother. Her parents had just bought her a brand new Mercedes. Her dad looked at me and said, "Make her keep it under 70. Then he opened the passenger door for me. He climbed in, and as he was closing the door, he said, "I didn't tell anyone. You better wear protection." Then we left, got Slurpees, and finished in the back of her new car parked in the cemetery. Story 11. I lived in a farm, and from my room, I could see anyone coming down the road and have enough time to get dressed before they got to the house. Well, my girlfriend and I were getting freaky, and I saw my dad's truck coming down the road. I figured I had enough time to finish the deed and get dressed, but no. He gunned it and ran into the house. Instead of getting dressed, I held the door shut so she could get dressed. My dad was pushing to try to open it. She finally got dressed, and I let him in. It was so weird. He likes to bring it up once in a while, and I just remind him he was being a weirdo. Story 12. Me and my boyfriend had been together for about 6 months and were pretty adventurous all the time, like teenagers are. We were in his living room, and he still lived at home with his mom at the time. I got a bit carried away on the sofa and literally jumped off each other when he heard his mom come in the door, him pulling up his jeans and me pulling down my dress. He forgot about the garments that had made their way across the room. His mom didn't miss it and made a joke about the color, telling us to make sure to go somewhere more private next time. I was mortified, and so was my boyfriend, especially since it was a running joke in the family for a few months afterward. I'm 40 now, and it's still ingrained in my memory. Story 13. My boyfriend and I were both teenagers. I decided to have intimacy with him a month prior, simply out of spite. My previous boyfriend broke up with me since I wasn't ready to have intimacy yet, and I had discovered that intimacy wasn't exactly for me. Asexual, but my boyfriend did not feel the same, so the compromise was just to let him have intimacy with me and get it over with. We were at my parents' house, hanging out in my room, both parents home, door wide open, Sunday afternoon. He starts trying to get fresh, and I'm like, "Bro, no, parents are here." He says he'll be quick. Okay, fine. I roll over on my side, and he starts opening a protection. After a minute, I hear my mother clear her throat, and I immediately know that she's about to come down the hallway and drop off my portion of the laundry to fold. Tell him to stop. That my mother is coming back, and we're about to get caught. He didn't stop. So my mother walks in and starts talking about how this is the basket one of however, and these were the sheets, and she stops mid-sentence. Her and I locked eyes, and she stifled a giggle. She sets the basket down while swallowing a chuckle, shakes her head, goes to leave, stops and turns back around to face me, points and covers her mouth and scurries out of the room, leaving the door open. I spun around and was like, "What the hell, dude?" And he said, "Well, I slowed down. You don't think she really saw anything, do you?" I left a little while later, and I walked him to the front door. As I walked back to my room, I crossed paths with my mother with a smug grin on her face, and she asked, "You want to talk about it?" I stormed past her, wanting to just crawl under a rock and say no. She wound up having giant cartoon eyes and said, "Your eyes were like dinner plates." The next day, I found a box of variety pack protections with a note in her perfect cursive that read, "I wasn't sure your preferred brand, so I got a mix. Don't make that boy my son-in-law, please." Story 14. We were doing it in the downstairs couch in the theater room. It was a snowy morning, so I had spent the night at her house. As teenagers do, we woke up and started going at it. Her dad started coming down the stairs, so we literally froze. Her dad sat down on the couch while I was still just inside of her. We legit just pretended we were cuddling for about 10 minutes while her dad sat and watched with us. Another time, with a different girl, we were in the middle of it and her dad knocked on the door. She just got up, wrapped a blanket around her, and opened the door. My thing was out. Didn't even think twice about it. She just started talking to her dad. He had one of those rooms where you could see the entire room from the door with no place to hide. Her dad was just in shock. Story 15. It wasn't my ex's parents, but a mutual friend. My ex and I were going at it when our friend just walked into my ex's room without knocking. I heard our friend with enough time to drop and cover onto my ex, basically crushing his thing with my stomach and rip a sheet over us. Our friend sat down on my ex's desk and started talking, completely oblivious to what we were doing. My ex and I were just lying there like, give us a second, okay? We were lying there for a good 10 minutes when our friend finally realized what we were doing and almost ran out. Story 16. My current wife and I were in our first year of our relationship, and she was staying at my house for the weekend while I still lived with my father. My parents had separated the year before, and my mother would still come over to pick things up to take to where she was living at the time. Anyway, we were spooning on the couch and in the middle of intimacy since we had the house to ourselves for the weekend. Out of nowhere, we heard the door open with no knock or doorbell. My mom came in and saw us. She said, "Oh my God," and left. Well, we were still in the heat and kept going at it. Then she walked in again 5 minutes later. This time we bailed to the room and got dressed. Then all hell broke loose. She was screaming, calling us pieces of crap, and started breaking everything in the house. She was throwing kitchen knives into the walls, threw a lamp through a sliding glass door, broke the headlights in my truck, and more. I ended up calling the police because she was completely unhinged. Always had anger issues, but this was a new extreme. I didn't press charges, but had the police get her to leave. Later that night, while we were sleeping, I heard a couple of loud bangs and went outside to see a car speeding off, and both of my truck's rear tires popped. She still hasn't forgiven me for calling the police. She brought it up last year, and I guess she has a pistol now because in the middle of her screaming, she grabbed it and pointed at my head. So yeah. Story 17. This was over 20 years ago, but I had a girlfriend's mother walk in on us while I was getting a whistle on the living room couch. Maybe not the smartest place to get a whistle, but it was like 1 a.m. and her parents almost never got up in the middle of the night. The layout of the house was such that she approached us from behind from the kitchen. We both thought we heard something, but her mother didn't confront us. She just went back to bed, and my girlfriend continued. The next day, my girlfriend called me and told me how her mother was making fun of her at dinner in front of her brother and stepfather for doing it on the couch. Story 18. I've had a few close calls. My girlfriend's dad once walked down the stairs just as I was finishing up. I've also had my dad come home early while my college girlfriend, now my wife, and I were loudly having intimacy in an upstairs room with the door open. On another occasion, a neighbor started watching football downstairs at my parents' house while a different college thing and I were having loud intimacy in the same room. The first scenario. He managed to throw a blanket over us and she pretended to snuggle with me while her dad chatted with us about the movie we were supposedly watching. She gave him a hug and kiss on the cheek before he went back upstairs. The second scenario. My now wife and I got dressed, went downstairs to make dinner before we realized my dad was home. No words were spoken. The third scenario. We had not heard the neighbor enter. He was calmly watching football with a beer. I was confused about why the TV was on and walked down in my garments, and the girl followed, topless in her panties. I'm not sure why. The neighbor said, "Cheers," and laughed until I asked him to go back to his own house across the street. He asked if he could take his beer with him. Story 19. We were both teens at the time. Her dad walked in, turned around, and walked out. We got dressed and headed downstairs where he was waiting in the kitchen. He said, "I can't stop you, but I expect one rule to be followed. No babies." He then turned to his daughter and said, "You can't even afford your own pads. How are you going to afford diapers? Protections will be in the upstairs medicine cabinet. Leave a sticky note in the coffee machine if you run low." He then got in his vehicle and left. Came back that night with the biggest box of protections I have ever seen and put some in a plastic container in the medicine cabinet. As the relationship came to an end a couple of years later, he called me and offered me money to stay with her. He even offered to pay my way through college. It's not something I would ever put a price tag on. Story 20. My dad almost walked in on me losing my V-card on the living room couch. It was the middle of the night. I wasn't supposed to be down there. I was a desperate teenager. What can I say? Thankfully, the stairs that are 100+ years old creaked very loudly and we were able to recover and put ourselves at opposite ends of the couch. Another time was my sister-in-law, but I feel like that counts. We were at a hotel. I told my husband his family wasn't going to be gone as long as he thought they were. He didn't believe me. I made him put the chains in the door anyway. Apparently I know them better than him because guess who was right? Me. Maybe she didn't see anything, but she totally knew. Story 21. My father had a freaking habit of just walking in through my door at all times. There were no locks on the door, so we had to be quick to get under cover. The absolute fastest I've ever seen a woman move was when my girlfriend and I just had intimacy. I was getting dressed while she still laid in my bed. I went to put on my shirt, and in doing so, I knocked the ceiling lamp out of its socket. It bounced off my head, then hit the floor and shattered into a million pieces. My father sprang into the room, and all I saw was a blurry whirl of covers. Her girlfriend was completely hidden under the covers. My sister also once commented about not using strawberry-scented rubbers. She said it really stinks up her room, and she didn't want to know when I was having intimacy with my girlfriends. Story 22. When I was a teenager, I was staying at my dad's house. He was meant to be at work, so my girlfriend and I were doing it on the couch in the living room. He came home, and it was about 10 meters from the front door to the corner where he'd see us. He yelled, "Don't come in!" He ignored me and was met by my girlfriend and me holding couch cushions, covering her bits. A year or two later, he was definitely meant to be at work, and my sisters were meant to be at my mother's. Well, there was some emergency with my mother, and my sisters needed to be picked up and taken care of. I was, once again, engaging in on the couch. Despite actually having my own room at this point, I heard the door open and yelled, "Don't come in!" My dad held my sisters back and waited. Clothes were rapidly applied and she walked out the back door. It ended with me just looking at my two older sisters with a face that said, "Can we all pretend this didn't happen?" Story 23. My ex and I were quietly enjoying the afternoon, still mostly dressed. In walked his mom with some chicken tenders for him, not realizing I was even there. It partly blocked the door with a hockey stick, so she just forced it open, and it gave us a precious second to cover her up. My ex dived into his closet, making no attempt to hide me. In fact, he shoved me into a much worse position in an effort to protect his own dignity. I didn't manage to turn in over time to gauge what she saw, but she left in a hurry, saying a very quick, high-pitched, "Hello," to me. The schmuck didn't even share his chicken tenders with me. My current boyfriend's mom has come close a couple of times, but my boyfriend is very quick to prioritize defending my dignity before his own, which makes me feel much better. Lol. Parents of adult children living at home, please just knock. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 24. I'm a parent who had a kid walk in on us last week for the first and, hopefully, the last time. It was a captivating experience, to say the least. Our kids, aged 4 and 2, usually sleep very deeply. You could literally fire a cannon next to their room and they wouldn't notice. So my wife and I went to a good old activity late in the evening with the lights on, thinking nobody would notice except us. Our bedroom is on the top floor of the house and doesn't have a door. mainly so we can hear the kids on the floor below us in case they have a nightmare or something. In the middle of all the good stuff, being very much in the moment and not paying any attention to the world around us, our kid suddenly appeared next to the bed. He was staring in silence for a few seconds, only to break it with a, "There's a mosquito in my room." It's safe to say we didn't know what the hell to do for the first minute or so, hiding under the sheets and contemplating our life choices. Afterward, it ended the mosquito like it had ended our entire vibe. Explained the whole ordeal to our kid in a way that is suited for a kid. We hope so, anyway, because not a single second of her prior life had prepared us for this exact scenario. We are praying to both Bob Ross and Harambe that he will not tell or reenact any of it to his buddies at school. Story 25. My ex and I were in the middle of it, and her dad caught us. He was intoxicated and had come home from the pub without us hearing. He quietly opened the door, walked into the room, and jumped on us while shouting, "Dog pile!" He landed on my back, laughing. I was like, "What the heck?" and threw him off. He landed on the floor next to the bed. I lay next to my partner while she pulled the sheets over her, covering both of us. We were stunned while he was laughing. He got up off the floor and leaned on the bed, starting to ramble about something, but he was too intoxicated to make sense. Because he was so intoxicated that he tried to steady himself with his hand, but it ended up landing between my legs, way too close for comfort. With his other hand, he suddenly grabbed mine and just started shaking it, going on about how much he liked me. After a moment, he got up and stumbled out of the room. The funny part, the hand he was shaking was my right hand, and I'd been using that hand for, let's just say, other activities right before. Anyway, in the morning, he definitely knew what he had walked in on. He never spoke a word about it. He was a nice guy and sadly passed away a few years later of cancer. You were a good guy, Mark. Story 26. My ex-girlfriend bought her first apartment. I was living at home at the time, so naturally I spent a lot of time at her place. Our parents had a spare set of keys and would let themselves into her apartment multiple times without any upfront notice. This was weird and concerning on its own, but that's not the point of the story. They told them to start letting us know when they wanted to come over or at least ring the doorbell instead of using their key. They ignored us and continued to come into the apartment unannounced. I then told them to start ringing the doorbell or they would someday walk in on us. They ignored that as well. One day, they walked in on their daughter on all fours. They were unpleasantly surprised, but my ex and I did not care. Story 27. I didn't get caught in the very act, but immediately after. I had just finished. It was a first, and some got into her eye. I was putting on my pants when her dad opened the door. She was telling me it was in her eye. He looked at me like I was a disgrace and left the room. He went for a drive without saying a word to anyone before leaving. We never spoke of it. He was like a second dad to me for many years. He also found a purple toy when touring our house. He just looked the other way. He knew his daughter was a freak. It wasn't my fault, but I'll happily go along for the ride. It's funny to think back on that. Lol. Story 28. I was at my girlfriend's house in high school. Her mom opened the door and my girlfriend barrel rolled off the bed, taking the blanket with her. I was lying there and her mom said, "Do you know where your girlfriend's name is?" As if she hadn't just seen her roll off the side of the bed. I just said, no. And she closed the door. Another time, we were at my house in high school during the summer. We were having some fun and I heard my mom yell up the stairs, "You know I'm home, right?" She'd come home early. The look my girlfriend and I gave each other was priceless. Lol. In each instance, nothing was said about it afterward, and everyone involved tried to act like it never happened. Story 29. When I was in middle school, I walked 2 miles to my girlfriend's house so that we could make out on her front porch. It was late at night in the summer. Her dad walked out and caught us kissing. He turned on the lights, and I took off. Fast forward to about a year after college, she and I were again making out on her front porch. This time I had gone further. I was thinking about when we were younger and her dad had turned on the light and came out. About a minute later, on came the lights, and there I was. This time I just shook my head and laughed. I wonder how many other times this has happened to that poor guy. Story 30. My girlfriend and I were fooling around in her bedroom, which was upstairs. Thankfully, the stairs were creaky and our parents made us keep the door open when we hung out. One day we were watching a movie and I ended up under the covers. When we heard the familiar creak on the stairs, I shot out from under the blanket and sat at the foot of the bed, watching the TV. She wrapped herself in the blanket, trying to look natural as her dad walked in. He even sat on the bed to see what we were watching and made normal dad small talk. I know damn well my face was still shiny with various fluids, but I kept my face glued to that TV until he left the room. It's kind of hilarious to think back on. Story 31. I was 22 and had just stopped living with my parents. I was with a group of friends and I was about to give a guy a whistle when a girl I also kind of fancied walked in and said, "What are you two up to?" 10 minutes later, we were both taking turns giving him a whistle and my parents arrived home with my dad's mistress in tow. They thought they were just checking to see if they had the house to themselves. My father's reaction was, "Oops, sorry." While my mother's was, "See, I told you he swings both ways." All 6 of us were present at breakfast on Saturday. Story 32. My girlfriend and I were doing it when we heard someone approach her room. We quickly stopped and pretended to just be watching TV in bed. Mom walked in, looked at us weird, and said, "You know what? Not important right now." Then turned around and left. A minute later, the door opened a smidge and a hand appeared and flicked a box of protections in the general direction of my bed. The same ex, at a different time. Her parents and sister went to get McDonald's for all of us and we thought we could sneak in a quick one. I guess we weren't as fast as them because they were back without us realizing it. Again, the door just opened a tad and two McFlurries just appeared on her bookcase before it shut closed again. The looks I got from her dad that day made me so afraid that my life was going to come to a sudden, swift end. She got a key to her bedroom after that. Story 33. One time, a girl's dad chased me out of their apartment with a shotgun. Another time, a different girl's mom came downstairs to sneak a cigarette while we were having intimacy. She thought we were just cuddled up under the blanket watching a movie with her daughter on top of me. She proceeded to have a discussion with us while I was inside her daughter, trying not to move. I also had my mom open my door to ask me something while my girlfriend and I were watching porn. Apparently, my mom was complaining to my dad about it and he just laughed. Story 34. This story isn't about me, but about my brother, who was caught during an encounter that I saw happen. His room was across from mine and he was in there with his girlfriend, door closed. My door was open, and I was just gaming. My mom came upstairs because she had made a pizza and wanted to share it with them. She proceeded to open the door with a pizza in hand, and before she could even finish asking if they wanted any, she said, "Oops, I'm sorry." She gave me this shocked look and walked downstairs. I immediately knew what had happened. Later, when I talked to my brother about it, he explained his perspective. He and his girlfriend had intimacy about an hour prior. She had put some of her clothes back on, and he had stayed. He got excited again and wanted to do more. I forget how it ended up like this, but by the time my mom entered his room, she saw his girlfriend fully clothed and my brother was not, doing it on one knee as she lay there waiting for him. Story 35. When I was a teenager, I planned to move abroad. My girlfriend and I had agreed to enjoy the time we had together and then break up when I left. We were both mature enough to know that long distance wouldn't work. Anyway, the very last time we were hanging out, we started having passionate goodbye intimacy. While she was on top, her mom opened the door. She was facing my girlfriend, who just froze like a deer in headlights. They stared at each other for what felt like an eternity, but was realistically maybe 3 seconds before her mom said, "I'm going to the store. I'll be back for at least an hour." 3 hours later, her mom still wasn't home. We said our goodbyes and I left, thankfully never having to deal with the awkwardness. Story 36. My wife's family has a bad habit of not knocking before they come inside a room, which is specifically why when we lived with them for a bit, I installed one of those interior sliding locks for our room. But one time afterward, when we were just staying for a night, my mother-in-law walked in, trying to ask my wife where something was placed. She then just turned and said, "Oh, sorry," and left. Later, she was adamant to my wife that she didn't see anything when they tried to speak. However, the next day, my wife overheard her, "Oh my God, I can't believe I walked into my daughter bent over the bed with her husband behind her." Phone call to my wife's sister. Story 37. Early one morning, my girlfriend and I, both around 16, were in, let's say, an inverted position. I thought I heard a gasp when we stopped. I looked and no one was there, but I knew for sure my mom had caught us, so we got dressed and went for a walk. A few minutes into the walk, my mom drove up and told us to get in. We did, and she parked the car. "If either of you has a baby, I won't be the one to take care of it," she said. I stupidly said something to the effect of, "I'm pretty sure she can't get pregnant that way," and I got a smoldering look. Ultimately, she said, "Just be careful and don't do stuff in the living room or people could find us." Story 38. It was my first time, and we had just finished when we heard his mom come home way earlier than we expected with groceries, and she was headed upstairs. He threw her clothes on, but I wasn't supposed to be there with no parents in the house, so he threw me and my clothes in his closet. The cover of the sound of the closet door opening and closing loudly started throwing darts at it. When she got to the room and opened the door without knocking, she said, "Come help me with the groceries." "Why are you red and sweaty?" He said. "I just, worked out a little," she said. "Yeah, right. Are you going to help?" He said no, and they fought about it a little. He says they were staring at each other for a while, but I swear I heard her leave. Don't know. I was in the closet for about 20 minutes to half an hour total. He called his mom back up and asked her to go to the store for him to get her to leave so I could go. Then I asked my parents if we could push our camping trip back a day so I could see him before I left for a week. Otherwise, I wouldn't see him for 3 weeks because the day before I got back, he was going to start a 2-week skate camp at Woodward and CT. I said no, and when I told him, he said, "That's fine. I got what I wanted, so I don't have to see you for a while anyway." He definitely cheated on me at that camp and while I was away. I'm so sure of it. Story 39. When I was a teenager, I had a girlfriend come over to hang out in my room to Netflix and chill. My dad had a rule about leaving the door open, which I always followed. My girlfriend and I decided to try a back door at the time. As we were watching a Netflix movie in my room, lying in my bed with a blanket covering us, making it look like we were just spooning, I decided to make a move and get to sexy time. Right as I got all the way, my dad decided to walk in, stand at the doorway, and have a little discussion about a wrestling meet I had coming up. I spent no more than 5 minutes while having a conversation with my dad. She said it was painful at first, but then she started to enjoy it. She said she could feel me talking. And no, he never knew because when I got older, that was one of our father-son talk at bonfire with some beers discussions, and we had a good laugh. Good times. Story 40. My dad walked in on me twice. The first time, my lady friend was putting her garments back on. He walked in, turned on the lights, and walked out. He didn't know the woman, as it was a casual thing, but he apologized for not knocking. The second time was with my neighbor's daughter, who's a couple of years older than me. My dad walked in, the lights were already on, and we were going at it. He walked out. She wanted to stop and make sure either he didn't notice it was her or he wouldn't tell her dad. I asked my dad if he caught sight of the woman. He repeatedly said no, then finally said, "No, I didn't see it was Miss last name." He said he wouldn't tell. I went back up and let her know he saw but wouldn't tell, and then we finished. Story 41. We had intimacy in his parents' bed, because his parents were away and his bedroom was next to his brother's room, who was home, and would pester us whenever he thought we were messing around. His parents' room was an ensuite and pretty separated from the rest of the house. After we were done, I took a shower and changed, and then we watched TV downstairs and I went home. Guess what idiot? Me. It was me. Left garments and a brush in their room. I'm guessing my idiot boyfriend also didn't think about changing the sheets or hiding any other evidence. His parents were straight shooters and liked me, so they sat him down and read him the riot act and told him to tell me that they told both of us it was gross to leave evidence and to clean up better after ourselves no matter what surface we were doing it on. Sage advice, considering how many back seats and basement couch cushions saw our backsides, and we definitely never went near their bedroom again. Story 42. My dad walked in on me with a girlfriend I had in high school. He was telling me goodbye before he left for work, kind of jumped up, put some shorts on, and went out to apologize, and his response was, "It's not every day an old man like me gets to see a pretty young lady." I'm like, okay, you creep. Lol. My dad is awesome. Bonus points for the time his best friend almost walked in on me getting a whistle in our detached garage man cave. The girl noticed nothing, but I just saw a set of eyes and a nose appear through one of the garage door windows, noticed the situation, and then the thumbs up. It turns out I was looking for my dad, and the only reason it didn't barge right in was because we normally kept the door locked. I'm pretty sure nobody but me was even home. Lol. Story 43. Back in high school, I lived in a small camper trailer outside the house. My girlfriend came over, and we naturally disappeared to my room to fool around. She was giving me a whistle, and right as I was about to finish, my mom whipped the door open and walked in unusually quickly under the guise of bringing us snacks, which we hadn't asked for and didn't want. I was able to quickly cover myself up, but my girlfriend had to take a short straw. My mom sat next to us and chatted with us for what seemed like forever. Eventually, my girlfriend and I laughed it off, but I never found out if my mom was spying on us or if she was just the master of perfectly bad timing. Story 44. This happened to my wife and me a few years ago. We'd been married for 3 years and were trying to get pregnant. One weekend, we were visiting her family for a wedding and were staying in the guest room at her parents' house. She had an app on her phone for tracking fertility, and the morning after the wedding, the app identified it as the best time to have intimacy. It was around 9 a.m., and the rest of the family was either sleeping or downstairs having breakfast, so we were trying to be quiet. The guest room bed was pretty squeaky, but we had long since figured out that if my wife lay across the center of the bed with her back on the edge, and I did it while standing at the edge, the bed wouldn't make any noise. So there we were. My wife's mom, thinking we were still asleep and bringing in a set of fresh towels, opened the door. Neither of us noticed right away because I was facing away from the door and my wife had her eyes closed and was covering her own mouth with her hands to try to stay quiet. The door didn't make any noise, especially since her mom was trying to quietly deliver towels. I just finished, so I turned to see my mother-in-law standing there, wide-eyed, holding towels. She looked from me to her daughter before saying, "Oh crap," and closing the door in a panic. She and her mom are very close and later talked about the incident. Apparently, she didn't understand what she was seeing at first. From the angle of the door, she couldn't see my wife and thought I was just standing at the edge of the bed looking out the window on the other side. So she was standing there trying to figure out how to quietly get out of the situation without being noticed. Then I turned around and saw her, and she finally got the hint as to what was going on but just stood there, dumbfounded for a few seconds. Story 45. My parents were gone, so I brought a girl to my room. We were just starting to get into it when my parents came home early. Since my room faced the driveway, we knew to put our clothes back on. My room was on the second floor, so there was no casually walking through the house pretending to look at family photos on the walls. We quickly popped in a movie and started to pretend like we were just hanging out. My mom saw the lights in my room, and since I wasn't supposed to be home at the time, she marched upstairs only to tell the girl, "I'm sorry, honey, but you need to go home now." She then proceeded to yell at me and tell me I wasn't allowed to have girls over when they were gone. My dad casually strolled up the stairs during this, and my mom made him yell at me some more. 2 days later, I came home from school to my dad sitting in the garage drinking a beer. I tried to avoid him because I was embarrassed, so he told me to come sit and talk with him. I proceeded to sit down, and he reached back into the mini fridge on the bench behind him, pulled out and cracked a beer, and handed it to me. He took a sip of his and said, "So, she was pretty cute," and then proceeded to act like nothing happened. My dad has always been my best friend, I just didn't know it at the time. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.